Good morning. Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Berkeley. I'm Reverend Marcus Liefert, and I'm so glad to be with you this morning. And happy Mother's Day to those who celebrate, and all of us who have mothers. Happy Mother's Day. Glad you were born. Glad you are here. If you're visiting for the first time today, I want to offer you especially a welcome. We hope that no matter who you are or how you make your living, no matter how you experience the sacred or whom you love, you'll feel welcome here. There's folks at the welcome table in the atrium who are happy to answer any questions you might have about our community, and everyone is invited to make your way all the way across the atrium into the social hall after the service for a lunch and coffee and tea. Stick around for conversation if you can. There's a memory book at the back of the sanctuary. Each week, anyone who would like to share a joy or a sorrow, grief, gratitude, anything that's on your heart that you'd like lifted up in our service, you can write it there and I'll read it aloud. Or you can simply light a candle for a silent memory or prayer. We are in a season of worship where we're talking about beauty as a moral organizing principle under the rainbow sign. And today we're thinking about how beauty might be one of the pathways that leads us to peace, the work of peace as an artwork. So let's rise in body or in spirit and begin our service with the hymn, "This Is My Song," a song of peace.
Also known as Ginger. I'm your worship associate, and as we light our chalice to begin our service, we remind ourselves that our church occupies the unceded territory of the Chochenyo-speaking Ohlone people. May we have the humility and courage to do our part to restore what has been broken and the wisdom to live in a new solidarity with indigenous communities and the earth. Let us kindle our chalice flame with these words by Elizabeth McMaster. We light our flaming chalice to illuminate the world we seek. To search for truth, may we be just. In the search for justice, may we be loving, and in loving, may we find peace. Now will you join me in saying our covenant? Love guides this church. The quest for truth and justice is its common purpose: to give thanks, listen deeply, speak with care, honor our differences, and seek and grant forgiveness. These things we covenant with one another.
Good morning. We'd like you to join in a beautiful chant, Navajo prayer. I'll teach it to you. Ginger will help with the response, and then we'll have group 1 and then group 2. Now I walk in beauty.
Now I walk in beauty.
Beauty. Oh gosh, I started it wrong. Now I walk in beauty.
Now I walk in beauty.
Beauty is before me.
Beauty is before me.
Beauty is behind me.
Beauty is behind me.
Above and below me.
Above and below.
All together.
me.
Now I walk in beauty. Beauty is before me. Beauty is behind me. Above and below me.
Now I walk in beauty. Beauty is before me. Beauty is behind me.
Beauty is behind me, above and below. Now I walk in beauty. Beauty is behind me. Beauty is behind me, above and below. Now I walk in beauty. Beauty is behind me. Beauty is behind me, above and below me.
Thank you.
Steps here. My friends young and young of heart, come on up. This is a story that takes place on a piece of land where there now stands a beautiful mosque, the Dome of the Rock. But way, way before that, there was an incredible temple built by King Solomon, according to legend. But this story doesn't take place then. It takes place even way further back before that. Thanks, you guys. I appreciate the company. All right, so it's a story. Oh, yeah, welcome. Come on up. So this is a story. It takes place when there was nothing there but a field. And there were two brothers who lived on that field. But they didn't share the field and do the work together because these two brothers had had a big fight at some point. Did anybody ever had a fight with a family member? Yeah, oh, some of you have? Yeah. So it was one of those fights. Have you ever had this kind of fight where you can't even remember what it was that started the fight? Yeah. But they'd been in the fight so long, it was so bitter that they didn't speak to one another at all. In fact, they had divided their field with a fence, right on down the middle. And one brother tended to his, and he lived alone, and one brother had a big family and tended to his side of the field. And after this had been the case, and life had been going on like this for many, many years, one night, one brother woke up in the middle of the night for some reason, and something caught his eye, and maybe there had been a sun flare, and suddenly the sky was illuminated with color. Who knows? Maybe it was something beautiful. But he had this thought, I live alone, while my brother over there has a wife and a whole big family to feed. But we split the field exactly 50-50. That's really not fair. I should really do something for my brother. He needs more. And so that night, in the middle of the night, he got up and he got a bucket and he filled it with wheat from his wheat pile, and he took it, snuck through. There must have been some kind of crack in the fence. He snuck through and he dumped the bucket on his brother's wheat pile. Now that same night, because of the beauty of the world, his brother also woke up and he had this thought. He thought, my brother, he lives alone. There's no one to take care of him. I have a whole family, a wife and kids who will grow up and take care of me, and yet we split this field 50-50. That's not really fair. He needs more. He needs something. He doesn't have anyone to take care of. I better give him something. And so that night he took a bucket and filled it up from his wheat pile and snuck across the fence and dumped it on his brother's pile. And the next morning, of course, they were both looking at their wheat piles and seeing they looked kind of about the same. They thought to themselves, I thought I gave something to my brother. That night, of course, they got up again and thought, I really need to give a real gift to my brother tonight. He needs it. And so they filled up a nice big wheelbarrow full, brought it around, dumped it, and of course they looked at their piles because they had both done it the next morning. Now, we won't go on and on, but the next night, as they each dragged their gigantic barrels of wheat over to give something that would be a meaningful gift to the brother who really needed it, they ran into one another. And when they did, their tears and their hugs moved them to the point that very night they tore down the fence. And the legend says, and this is the way I heard the story from my favorite storyteller growing up, Joel Ben Izzy, a local Jewish storyteller. He said that the legend says that God looked down at that moment and said, this land where brothers can fight and learn to love one another again, this will be holy land. Someday there will be a magnificent temple, and someday there will be a beautiful mosque, and someday there will be peace. Here on this land, here in this world. May that day not be far off. Will you join me in singing out our children? We'll keep singing that Chalice Camp song we've been singing. I'll sing a line, you sing it back. It's a blessing you were born, and it matters what you do. What you know about God is a piece of the truth. Let the beauty we love be what we do, and we don't have to do it alone.
Now, when I heard, well, first of all, happy Mother's Day to all you mothers and to everyone who ever had a mother. So when I was considering the topic today of mothering and peacemaking, the first thing I thought of was not necessarily international movements, but more the back seat of the car. Now, I had two brothers, and I have two children, so I've been on both sides of this issue. And the poking and the prodding, and his elbow is on my side, and she hit me first, and she took my stuff. It goes on and on. Divide and separate. That was the strategy that worked well for my mom. Kind of worked for me too. Luckily, we each were able to have our own rooms. But that back seat, you're trapped, It's a real time for negotiation and, distraction. We gave our cassette player, remember those, a workout, listening to Raffi and children's songs, and then audio books on longer trips. And we started I Spy, and, we did this thing where everyone would take a sentence of a story and then pass it around. It was sort of fun. But when I think back of my own mom and peacemaking, the story that comes to my mind is not necessarily peacemaking, but rather rattling the status quo. Now, my mother was largely brought up unchurched. Her parents were raised and moved to the United States from Bohemia, which is now the Czech Republic and had been Czechoslovakia. And they were originally back in Europe Catholic, but when they came to New York, they were pretty much unchurched. And my father, however, was a devout Catholic, and he was German-Irish. And so my mother, in order to appease him, converted to Catholicism. And, she was okay with that. But then, sadly, he passed away when I was kindergarten age. And my Irish Catholic grandmother insisted that her daughter-in-law raise us Catholic, continue to do so, and sent us to Catholic school. So up until I was about 10 years old, we would go to Catholic school up to third grade. I was at the school, and then I went to catechism for a year or so after that. But my mother was a little skeptical, because one time they asked her if she would like to teach. Now, because her European-born father believed that women didn't need a post-secondary education, she only was educated at the Packard School for Business to learn to be a secretary. Did very well, but that was the extent of her education, and she was kind of shocked that the school was asking her to teach. She didn't have a credential. She didn't even have a degree. And in any case, in third grade, a substitute teacher came in and taught our class of 8 and 9-year-olds that if we were ever in a situation where we were present when someone had become wounded or hurt, the first person we should call was a priest, because one needed to take care of their immortal soul and to make sure they made it to heaven and get last rites. Well, as a dutiful 8-year-old, I remembered this and came home, wrote a little paragraph about it. My mother went, well, in the 60s they didn't have this word, but we'll use it now, ballistic. And she was so upset. She has a widow. The kids were often the only ones around, and she thought, what if I fall off a ladder or something happens? I want my kids to know what to do. And that's well before 911. You just had a dial operator. And, I remember her having us practice this and what to say. She went to the school and made an issue out of this. And she went to that intimidating Sister Mary Walter, who was the principal, scared me. And she made a big deal out of it, had a priest come and talk to this class of 8 and 9-year-olds and insist, and everyone understood the importance of what needed to happen. And so we got to finish out that grade, but needless to say, we didn't go back. So that was my mother. I don't know if she was a peacemaker, but she certainly, educated a group of 8 and 9-year-olds about what to do in an emergency. Thank you.
Ave, Ave Maria. gracia. Bendita eres tú entre todas las mujeres, y bendito es el fruto de tu vientre, Jesús. Ave, Ave María, llena, llena eres de gracia. Bendita eres tú de entre todas las mujeres, y bendito es el fruto de tu vientre, Jesús. Santa, Santa María, Santa María, Madre de Dios, ruega de vosotros pecadores, y ahora y en la hora de nuestra muerte. Amén. Bendita eres tú entre todas las mujeres, y bendito es el fruto de tu vientre, Jesús. Santa, Santa María, Santa María, Madre de Dios, ruega de nosotros pecadores, y ahora y en la hora de nuestra muerte. Amén. Amén. Amén.
I invite you to take a deeper breath, to rest more comfortably in your seat, to feel your connection down to this good, this beautiful earth. There's a child in me wailing at the wars of the world. There's a child in me turning to face away, head held in hands. There's a child in me who cannot understand, who knows it's not right, who doesn't know what to do. And there are children fleeing homes and losing their lives. And there are mothers wailing, suffering a violence no words can capture. Holy mystery, nameless love that wraps us in our worst despair, in unbearable heartbreak, that is still there even when there are no more words left to describe the horrors we inflict upon each other, the suffering we endure. Holy love, bring us back in touch with that child deep inside whose cries are always a plea for peace. Bend our ears and the ears of all our leaders to that wailing. Enable us to again hear the call and turn anguish into action, division into compassion, anger into determination. On this day, let us all be mothers. Mother all of us with the fierce love of those who would hear the child's wail and respond as people capable of creating beauty even amidst the worst devastation. We rest in this love, in this stillness, in this quiet together. In this community of care and witness, we hold one another through the seasons of our lives. We light candles and lift up names. Today, with Carolyn James, thinking of my mother, Patricia, and my husband, George, who both died 3 years ago. With Andrea Brewer-Thompson, offering love, compassion, and moral support to all mothers in the world who are struggling. Jonathan is thinking of my mother and my grandmothers, gone now. Love. Pierre offers, I'm thinking of my mother-in-law, Judy LeBlanc, on this Mother's Day in our hearts as we celebrate. Catherine Welch shares, may all of us who nurture, love, and protect life be blessed with the ongoing strength to continue to do so, even when there's loss, violence, and desecration. May we all give and receive the fierce and tender love of mothering. We pray with Wynne, may my friend choose wisely in a house purchase, and may my help support her in that. And Anne Greenwood, along with all in our partner church community, lift up. Today is our partner church minister's birthday. He's 40. Reverend Guillermo Attila, thinking of you. For all that we've named, all that remains yet unspoken in the silent sanctuaries of our hearts, may we know that what each of us holds here is held in the loving embrace of this community. And by a nameless love beyond all knowing, a love that cannot and will not let us go. May it be so, and amen. Let's remain seated as we sing together. for the earth forever turning.
For the earth forever turning, for the skies for every sea, for our lives for all we cherish, sing we our joyful song of peace. For the mountains, hills, and pastures, in their silent majesty, for the stars, for all the heavens, sing we our joyful song of peace. For the sun, the rain, and thunder, for the seasons' harmony, for our lives, for all creation, sing we our joyful praise to thee. For the world we raise our voices, for the home that gives us birth. In our joy we sing, returning home to our blue green hills of earth.
If you've been around this place for years or decades, maybe you probably know this story, but it is one that bears repeating. The 19th century Julia Ward Howe Unitarian lay leader, who perhaps ironically is best known for writing the Battle Hymn of the Republic, was also a celebrated poet and dedicated peace activist in the second half of the 19th century. She traveled in influential circles. She worked tirelessly for women's suffrage, for the abolition of slavery, for prison and education reform. And during the Franco-Prussian War, she became a pacifist after she'd written that stirring anthem. Her niece once described her like this: Aunt Julia, she said, was a small woman of no particular shape or carriage, clothes never quite taken care of, her bonnets never quite straight on her head, and yet there was about her presence an unforgettable distinction and importance. Her speaking voice was very beautiful, her face had a sensitive gravity, a look of compassionate wisdom, until a twinkle of fun rippled over it and a naughty imp laughed in her eyes. So I think of that twinkle and that naughty imp when I hear these words that she wrote in 1870 when she proclaimed the first Mother's Day for peace, the origin of this holiday that has become something quite different, but for her was a call to action. This is part of that proclamation. She said, "Again have the skill and power of two great nations exhausted themselves in mutual murder. Again have the sacred questions of international justice been committed to the fatal mediation of military weapons. In this day of progress, in this century of light," she said, The ambition of rulers has been allowed to barter the dear interests of domestic life for the bloody exchanges of the battlefield. Thus men have done, thus men will do, but women need no longer be made a party to proceedings which fill the globe with grief and horror. Despite the assumptions of physical force, the mother has a sacred and commanding word to say to the sons who owe their life to her suffering. That word should now be heard and answered to as never before. Arise, then, women of this day. Arise, all women who have hearts, whether your baptism be of water or of tears. Say firmly, we will not have great questions decided by irrelevant agencies. Our husbands shall not come to us reeking with carnage for caresses and applause. Our sons shall not be taken from us to unlearn all that we have been able to teach them of charity, mercy, and patience. We, women of one country, will be too tender of those of another country to allow our sons to be trained to injure theirs. From the bosom of the devastated earth, a voice goes up with our own. It says, disarm, disarm. The sword of murder is not the balance of justice. Blood does not wipe out dishonor, nor violence vindicate possession. She called for an international Congress of Women, one that never came to fruition, but I think her call still rings clear today. I celebrated Mother's Day then the traditional way yesterday with my mom by attending a vigil in San Francisco with other interfaith clergy and many others who gathered to mourn the death of Shireen Abu Akleh, a Palestinian journalist who was killed 2 years ago, murdered by a sniper of the Israeli Defense Force, and the over 140 other Palestinian journalists who've been killed over the last 7 months. As we solemnly process down by the wharf along by the ferry building and down to the arrow sculpture, following a coffin with her name and with everyone in the procession holding the names of those journalists slain. It was a beautiful, if hard and heavy ritual. It was beautiful to be together in silence, to hold care, hold despair in community together. And as we processed, there were a couple of people who called out in what I can only call immature reactivity. People who were so unsettled in themselves that with what all going on in the world, this is what they could muster to shout out at this solemn, quiet procession of clergy. The first yelled out, quite disturbingly, "Hitler was right. Heil Hitler." And then just a few moments later, someone called out, "Bring back the hostages." Nothing to say but the hostages. I've been struck over these last 7 months by how much of our public conversation has been dominated by this kind of immature reactionary stance. There's a piece calling this out this week going around the internet. It's by Mo Husseini. He's a Palestinian American, lives up in the Northwest, who made 50 true statements, he said, 50 true statements, and most of them are not appropriate for church. So if you're interested, you'll have to go and read his 50 true statements, but they resonated for me. I bet they would for most of you. One of them, he said, the solution to the Middle East conflict will not be found on threads, on social media threads, on TikTok, or in the streets of any city that isn't within a 2-hour car ride from downtown Jerusalem. But what are we to do, we who know we are implicated, we are complicit in this conflict, in these bombs that drop funded by our tax dollars? What are we to do who would wish that we could, by going to the streets, bring about peace? And instead, we watch our own community at each other's throats. I was watching the testimony of Anikia Ford Morthell, the superintendent of our Berkeley Unified School District this week, called to testify before Congress about the challenges to address anti-Semitism here in our community. And I just think we're fighting about the wrong thing. And I just think it's a waste of our superintendent's time to be called before Congress to speak about this when she could be working on the many, many needs that I know many of you are working on to address inequality in our Berkeley schools. So the question I've been asking myself, the question that I don't feel like I have a good answer to as I read what people have to write and engage with their actions, is what is it that we are doing that perpetuates the cycle of violence, and what is it that liberates us from it? How do we know? When we're advocating for children in our schools, when we're speaking out to free Palestine, how do we know what helps liberate from the cycle of violence and what only perpetuates it? John Paul Lederach is an international consultant for peace negotiations. He's worked in areas of the most severe conflict around the world for many decades. He's a Mennonite and one of the preeminent scholars teaching peace building at Eastern Mennonite University's prestigious program. He would begin each graduate seminar in his peace building course with this question: how does social change actually happen? And over the years, he concluded, I have come to intuit more than scientifically prove, to feel more than quantify, that the center of building sustainable justice and peace is the quality and nature of people's relationships. The transformation that he's engaged with and witnessed in places of entrenched conflict, he says it emerges not primarily from particular skills or techniques, but from the capacity to imagine new possibilities, to see in the messy web of relationships the places where there is a possible turning point, an opening for change. And so he called his book on his body of work, The Moral Imagination. And one of the stories he tells a number of stories, and one of them is the women of Wajir, an area in the northeastern part of Kenya near the Somali and Ethiopian borders. The district is mostly made up of Somali clans, and when the Somali government collapsed in 1989, the whole region was destabilized and was soon rife with fighting. And so he starts the story like this: the women of Wajir did not set out to stop a war. They just wanted to make sure they could get food for their families. The initial idea was simple enough: make sure that the market is safe enough for anyone to buy and sell. This impulse, this beautiful impulse. Decca was one of the key women leaders in Wajir. One night when shooting erupted near her house, she ran for her firstborn child and hid for several hours under her bed while bullets crisscrossed the room. Processing what had happened in the morning, her mom remembered violence from 30 years before when Decca was a child and her mother held her under her bed. That conversation fueled a determination to find a way to make Wajir a place where her daughter would enjoy a violence-free life. Other women shared similar stories. They began to gather quietly, fewer than a dozen of them at first, working to make the market safe for them to feed their families became their focus. And so they set up a monitoring system of rotation of who would be keeping an eye on things. That developed into the Wajir's Women's Peace Association, and then their work spread to working with elders, to strategically using their relationships to find one particular elder on the council who might speak in favor of peace on their behalf, knowing that they couldn't make the voice the concerns themselves. And from there, then they realized that the youth would need to be engaged to stop the fighting, the youth who were taking up the guns themselves, and what the youth really needed were jobs, and so they engaged with the business community to find jobs for the youth. Step by step, they worked until all of these people were together in the Wajir Peace and Development Committee, which became a powerful force across communities. Guns were turned in, emergency response team deployed. A pause in the wake of a night of terror. A conversation between mother and daughter, a space of reflection amongst a gathered community, making room for imagination, making space for a new possibility. Lederach draws out 4 capacities that he says make this kind of moral imagination possible. The first, the moral imagination requires the capacity to imagine ourselves in a web of relationships that includes our enemies. We have to see those enemies as part of the same web. Second, the ability to sustain a paradoxical curiosity without reliance on dualistic polarity. Third, the fundamental belief in and pursuit of the creative act. That creativity is possible. And fourth, finally, the acceptance of the inherent risk of stepping into the mystery of the unknown that lies beyond the far too familiar landscape of violence. It is risky to do something different. But to do otherwise is only to perpetuate that cycle of violence that we know in all families, in all nations. One last story. In 1992, Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia, was besieged at the center of that war that dominated the headlines of my childhood. And one day in one neighborhood of the city, the hungry citizens of the city were lined up outside one of the few bakeries to remain open when a mortar shell burst among them. And the principal cellist of the Sarajevo Opera, a man named Vedran Smilovic, heard the shell burst and the screams and looked out the window to see the carnage. 22 people had been killed in the blast. And so heartbroken, Vedran felt called to respond, to do something in response to the tragedy, the horror. But rather than take a reactionary stance, he did what he felt he as an artist could do the next afternoon, dressed in his formal concert clothes. He took his cello and sat right there in the street where the shell had burst and played Albinoni Adagio in G minor. And the next day and the next, he showed up and played for 22 days. He showed up and played in that spot one day for each victim of the blast. And then, as the war raged on around him, he kept playing. Swati Chopra, who documented this, wrote about him. He played to ruined homes, smoldering fires, scared people hiding in basements. He played for human dignity that is the first casualty in war. Ultimately, he played for life, for peace, for the possibility of hope that exists even in the darkest hour. And asked by a journalist whether he was crazy for doing what he was doing, Smelovic replied, "You ask me if I am crazy for playing the cello? Why do you not ask if they are crazy for shelling Sarajevo?" This Mother's Day, may we all be mothers of a creative act that pulls us out towards the unknown, out towards the possibility of something beyond a cycle of violence forevermore. May we find something beautiful that pulls our hearts and our guts to action. These closing words from Reverend Dr. Robert McAfee Brown, words shared with me by a beloved colleague, Lindy Ramsden, who joins us sometimes online. None of the concern for beauty is finally a moral cop-out. Concern for beauty is not a moral cop-out. It plunks us firmly down in the midst of where we are. Where there is beauty apparent, we are to enjoy it. Where there is beauty hidden, we are to unveil it. Where there is beauty defaced, we are to restore it. Where there is no beauty at all, we are to create it. May it be so. And amen.
Let the beauty we love be what we do. There are hundreds of ways to kneel and kiss the ground. Join me, you can hum. Let the beauty we love be what we do. There are hundreds of ways to kneel and kiss the ground. Add harmonies. Let the beauty we love be what we do. There are hundreds of ways to kneel and kiss the ground. Let the beauty we love be what we do. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of ways to kneel and kiss the ground. Let the beauty we love be what we do. There are hundreds of ways to kneel and kiss the ground. Let the beauty we love we do. There are hundreds of ways to kneel and kiss the ground, to kneel and kiss the ground. Let the beauty we love be what we do.
We invite you now into the spiritual practice of generosity. Instead of passing the plate, you can give electronically by scanning the QR code on the back of your badge, or you can put cash or check donation into the envelope that is in front of you in the back of the pew. Put it in the box in the atrium. Each week, half of the offering plate is shared with a nonprofit Good Neighbor organization chosen by our wonderful Social Justice Council. Thank you so much for sharing, practicing generosity with UUCB and with our good neighbors. Offerings in any amount are accepted with gratitude. The good neighbor for this month is Yes to Nature, to Neighborhoods. In partnership with nature, Yes nurtures leaders who champion the well-being of our community. The vision is for Richmond youth, adults, and families to lead healthy, connected lives, motivate change in their neighborhoods, and inspire a safe and thriving community. Please join me now. That was great. In dedicating our offering. We dedicate our offering and ourselves to the mission of this congregation to create loving community, inspire spiritual growth, and encourage lives of integrity, joy, and service.
I want to let you know about a few things happening in the life of our community. As always, you can find the newsletter the week ahead on our website, uucb.org. Next Sunday, May 19th, we have our annual celebration and planning congregational meeting, celebrating our church year coming to an end, planning ahead for next year, talking about the budget. Please join us if you can right here or on Zoom. Childcare is provided. And also next Sunday after the service, somehow we're going to fit in there our newcomer Q&A. So if you're newish to the congregation and you want to find out more, stick around. Charis and I and others from our membership committee will be able to answer any questions you might have about what's going on here and how to get involved. The Freestone Committee is hosting an art sale coming up May 24th and 25th. There will be pottery, paintings, figurines, and other artifacts. Come check that out if you can. And then finally, I just want to invite anyone who is interested in joining me in this art of worship making, if that's the beauty that calls to your heart. All are invited to come to a retreat June 8th. We're going to have a full day here at the church to plan ahead for next year, to explore theological reflection and storytelling, all the arts of worship making and leading together. So I'd love for anyone who's interested to come join me for that day. Would you now rise once more in body or in spirit, and we'll sing our closing hymn. It's a peace round that Evely's going to lead us in.
I'm going to teach you the second line. Oh, wait. The first line, Om Shanti. So repeat after me. Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om. Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om. And just keep that going. Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om. Again. Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om. Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om. Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om. Keep it going. Shiva Hewa Shihan Kapayapaan Salam Shalom. Shiva Hewa Shihan Kapayapaan Salam Shalom Salam Shalom. 'Cause
To reach out a hand or touch a shoulder. Let us be connected. Or just reach out to beyond, especially if you're getting over a cold like me. Let the beauty we love be what we do. We are all capable of creative acts, acts that engage the moral imagination and make more peace possible. May we be such lights in the world. Amen, and may it be so.
May it be so, blessed.